Right next to Gary, there's a city where the loudest thing is the geese on Lake George. Welcome to Hobart. Originally a mill town, now suburban. In this video, I'll talk about its history and how it's transitioned into being a suburban town, but how livable is this city? How does it stack up against other cities in the region? Well, we'll find out towards the end, where I'll give it a Chris Livability Score. As I mentioned, Hobart sits right next to Gary. However, the two are very different. One city issues demolition permits, the other issues fishing permits. One fights to keep the lights on, the other fights to keep away the data centers. You get it. More on that later. Before I show you downtown, don't forget to like this video and subscribe. If you don't, I'll send the geese from Lake George over to your house and they'll take a dump on your front porch. Don't believe me? Just wait and see what happens.
Boy, that escalated quickly.
Alright. If you didn't know I was kidding there, then something's wrong with you. Get a sense of humor. Alright, well, this is downtown Hobart.
What up, Omar Apollo?
There's a lake, there's an art theater on the lake, and there's also a tavern on the lake, and several other shops, restaurants, and businesses. It's a nice little downtown for sure. Quiet, with not much happening. It's not all boarded up and ugly, not all built up and overcrowded. It's nice. What's not nice? Getting here. That's right. State Route 51 technically serves downtown, but it's not really a state route. At least it doesn't feel like one. Have fun if you're driving an 18-wheeler through here because you have to zigzag in all sorts of directions just to get through town on it. In fact, the whole local road network just kind of sucks around here. The main roads through the area all break up once they hit the rivers, the railroad lines, or property lines that were drawn out in 1855. Like, this is Liverpool Road, one of those main thoroughfares, and if you're in a certain part of Hobart, this is the only way to get to the shopping areas, unless you want to take the death trap that is I-65. You have four-way stop intersections that are screaming for roundabouts to replace them, a 90-degree turn followed by a 20-mile-per-hour zone, which I learned that nobody follows before hitting another 90-degree turn. Yeah, you're not getting anywhere fast around here, that's for sure. But once you survive the suburban obstacle course and finally land in downtown Hobart, it's actually pretty nice.
Hell yeah, it is.
By the way, this is the trend now. This is what young, soon-to-be homebuyers are looking for. They want to live in a suburb that has its own identifiable downtown. Not one that's littered with nothing but strip malls and vinyl plank subdivisions, although Hobart does have some of that. Anyway, people want a suburb that's full of mom-and-pop shops, one that has its own local theater, and in Hobart's case, you get all of that plus the bonus of it sitting right on the water. Look, the community takes full advantage of the lake. There's a walkway, a band shell for summer concerts, there's fishing and festivals that actually bring people in. But don't expect a Riviera. It's still Lake County. Lakefront charm, minus the glamour. Lake George is actually a man-made lake, not a natural one. So basically, it's proof that if you flood enough land, people will call it charming. So, Hobart had sort of a complicated start. Let me explain. Back in the early 1800s, there was the town of Liverpool at the junction of the Calumet and Deep Rivers. The town of Liverpool never thrived. Shocking, I know. Apparently swamps and mosquitoes weren't a great business plan. Who would have thought? In 1845, George Earle traveled 5 miles upstream the Deep River to build a dam to power the sawmills and grist mills. Because of him, the mill pond was given the name of Lake George. In 1847, Earle moved the post office from Liverpool to the new location, platted the town in 1849, and named it after his brother, Frederick Hobart Earl of England.
What up, Frederick Hobart Earl of England?
The grist mill actually lasted for over 100 years until it burned down in 1953 because nothing in northwest Indiana gets to retire. It just burns down. Hobart was along the Chicago-Detroit stage route, which we now call Old Ridge Road, but it was actually the railroad that made it grow. In 1858, Hobart became a trade center for lumber, bricks, milk, and other agricultural products, and at one point there were 3 different railroads that ran through town. Imagine that today, 3 railroads actually helping. In the good old days, brickmaking was the largest industry in Hobart by far. Clay was everywhere in Indiana, specifically northwest Indiana, with rich deposits in Chesterton, Porter, and Hobart. As a result, there were small brickwork operations that began in the 1850s, and as more railroads came through, the industry took off. It was dirty, hot, and exhausting work, so naturally they gave the workers a cute nickname, the brickies. To this day, Hobart High School athletic teams go by the brickies, because apparently their basketball team does nothing but foul everybody.
Foul? I didn't touch anybody!
And shoot bricks. One of the major brickyards in town was this one. In 1886, Owens converted from bricks to terracotta building tile, which was valuable stuff back then because it was one of the only fireproof building materials available. So basically, Hobart helped the city of Chicago avoid going up in flames again. The company changed hands in 1904 and closed in 1965, and just like that, the brickmaking industry in Hobart was gone.
Goodbye.
Leaving the high school mascot as the last surviving brickie in town. It wasn't just the brickmaking in town that helped Hobart grow, as the city also benefited from the steel mills in Gary. Towns like Hobart and especially Lake Station marketed themselves to potential homebuyers as great places to live for people who worked in the steel mills. Heck, Lake Station even called themselves East Gary for a while, until Gary became, well, the Gary that we know it to be today. At that point, they basically said, yeah, I think we're going to go back to being called Lake Station. For more on that, I'll have a video coming up on that place next week. Hobart incorporated as a town in 1889 and as a city in 1921. After the brickyard businesses slowed down, Hobart has more so been a suburb of Chicago. What, you don't think Hobart's a suburb of Chicago? Okay, alright, well that's fine. And to all of you who think that Hobart isn't a suburb of Chicago, yeah, that's fine. You can be a suburb of Gary instead.
Do you understand me?
Look, Lake County is a part of the Chicago metro area. Hobart is in Lake County. Hobart is mostly made up of suburban-like development with plenty of room to sprawl if the demand is there. And what's one of the best tests of suburbia? Commute time. The average commute time is among the highest in all of Indiana at 28.4 minutes. In fact, Lake County is stacked with cities at the top of that list because a huge chunk of people who live in Lake County, Indiana are driving to Chicago for work, and it takes a long time to drive to Chicago from here. Honestly, Hobart probably wouldn't have close to 30,000 residents if Chicago never existed, so I feel just fine in calling it a suburb of Chicago. If you disagree, that's alright. No, really, it is. I'll make sure to read them the next time that I'm in a standstill on I-8094 because the road is full of commuters from Hobart and other places that surround Hobart. Which brings me to this. Annexation. As the town grew over the years, Hobart has been aggressive about grabbing up the surrounding land. That's part of why there's so much empty space within the city limits. The big moves here were in 1988 when Hobart annexed Hobart Township and again in 1992 with Ross Township. At that point, Hobart obtained the Southlake Mall. Even though most people associate that with Merrillville, it's actually a part of Hobart. Not that any city would be fighting over it today. Even though the Southlake Mall and other businesses east on Lincoln Highway are technically in Hobart, they all have Merrillville addresses. That's because it's all a part of an old Merrillville zip code, 46410. Further proof that the region just doesn't make any sense. Yeah, the mall isn't much to look at today, but hey, it could be a lot worse. You could be Matson. At least all of the big box stores surrounding here are still open. Well, anyway, because of the annexation of so much of the surrounding undeveloped land, that means that Hobart is going to eventually try to develop it, right? In fact, Hobart could soon become home to a data center. And the people here aren't excited about it. Now, sure, it'll be a lot of tax revenue for the city, but data centers are basically the new power plants. Nobody wants them next door. This has been something that's been largely reported on, but if you don't know by now, some of these things can use as much electricity as hundreds of thousands of homes. These data centers, that is. So, yeah, kind of massive. And earlier this year, in August of 2025, the Hobart City Council approved of a rezoning that will allow for a data center to be built on 61st Avenue, just east of Colorado Street. At the time of me making this video, there's still one more rezoning that needs to be had before any plans for this data center can proceed. The biggest concern will be how it affects the surrounding neighborhoods. As you can see from this map here, there are some well-established subdivisions surrounding the property that the city is trying to rezone. And actually, while I was editing this video on Thursday, September 18th, 2025, a brand new article came out on the Chicago Tribune saying that Hobart gives the okay for the data center amid criticism. So, the data center has officially been approved. So there you go. Living next to a data center doesn't necessarily come with health risks by itself, but these data centers do use up an insane amount of power and water. So if you're on a well, don't be shocked if your water pressure suddenly feels like it's being regulated.
It comes out drip, drip, drip. It's ridiculous.
And power rates? Yeah, those are likely going to inflate across the country for the foreseeable future because of these data centers. Either way, the cornfields in Hobart aren't going to stay cornfields forever. Expect rezonings to take place here for the foreseeable future, whether it's a new vinyl plank subdivision built out of Elmer's glue, whether it's warehouses, or a data center humming away. You can always help me with my contribution to the national AI data center overload by following me on my other social media accounts. Yeah, much appreciated. Also, if you enjoy my videos, you can always support me through becoming a YouTube channel member, aka a Team Invader member, and the link for that is down below. If not, that's cool too. I still appreciate you a lot for watching. Today, the largest employer in Hobart is the St. Mary's Medical Center. There's also a large candy factory off of Lincoln Highway with a Merrillville zip code, but within the Hobart city limits, just like with the mall. There's a few other manufacturers in Hobart as well, but really, Hobart is a place that's mainly thought of as a place to live, as other cities in the region and Chicago offer more jobs. So Hobart's role is a place to live, sleep, and commute from. Back in 2008, Lake George flooded and it devastated downtown Hobart. Better think twice before buying lakefront property here. Okay, so we all get that Hobart feels pretty chill next to Gary, but how does it stack up against other cities in the region on Chris's livability score? Let's find out.
Education.
Hobart High School isn't the worst, but it's also not the best. But among the high schools in northern Lake County to choose from, it's among the better ones. No worries in the near future of funding for it to drop anytime soon. Education gets a 13 out of 20.
Crime.
The violent crime rate in Hobart is 89 for every 100,000 residents, well below the national average, while the property crime rate is slightly above the national average at 2,076 for every 100,000 residents. Don't leave your bicycle out in the front lawn and you should be fine. Crime gets a 17 out of 20.
Downtown.
I like downtown Hobart. I don't like getting to downtown Hobart, but I like the downtown. The art theater has a nice lineup of events at all times, it seems. The lake is nice to go to for a walk around on nice weather days. There's also plenty of shops, plenty of restaurants, plenty of bars to check out in downtown. Parking isn't a ridiculous expense. Downtown gets a 15 out of 20.
Economy.
The median household income is $71,000 per year, which is just shy of the national median household income per year, but quite a bit lower than that for the Chicago metro area. The poverty rate is 13.4%, which is a few percentage points higher than the national average. The median value of owner-occupied housing units is $203,000. Not bad if you want to look at it from an affordability standpoint. The US median value is up to $340,000. The worst thing about the Hobart economy would be that only 22.6% of adults 25 and older hold a bachelor's degree or higher. In return, that means that the only economic growth that the city itself will see will be data centers, warehouses, and other industrial companies. You know, all of the things that the residents go to the city council for and say that they don't want in their backyard, but in all reality, those aren't bad things for this community to have. Hobart is a middle-class, blue-collar city, and that's okay. Economy gets a 12 out of 20.
Environment.
The new data center could have an impact on the environment as it'll need lots of water to cool off its jets with, as all of the electricity that it requires to operate, it'll be a lot. There's also a greater regional water quality concern with the Calumet River watershed being among the most polluted in the country. At times, air pollution in Hobart can be on high alert depending on which way the wind blows. If it's coming from the northwest, there's probably times where the air quality could be a lot better. Apparently, Lake George has come a long way in terms of improving its water quality. Many people eat fish straight out of it. I don't know if I would, but anyway, environment gets a 12 out of 20.
Recreation.
Hobart's a region town. The best recreational opportunities would be when you head north towards the sandy beaches of Lake Michigan. It's actually not that far away from some really nice parts of Indiana Dunes. Head even further north and you'll find sand dunes for dozens of miles through Michigan. Otherwise, there's not much else to check out in near proximity. You'd have to drive hours away. Recreation gets a 6 out of 20.
History.
There's some interesting history here for sure. Something that I didn't mention earlier was how back in the days of the Prohibition, Hobart's taverns were considered to be friendly stops along the way to and from Chicago when both Gary and Hammond were hot with cops. Hobart provided a low-key opportunity for smugglers to pick up some booze and run it into Chicago. And, some of that stuff in this Chicago area, some of that kind of history is just kind of interesting. And the other history about Hobart I mentioned earlier. It's one of the oldest cities in the region. History gets a 14 out of 20.
Amenities.
The area over by the Southlake Mall along Lincoln Highway has most of the stores that people would want. But depending on where you are in Hobart, it might be a near 30-minute drive for you to get there. Unfortunately, the region only has one major shopping area that has everything, and it's in the southwest corner of Hobart, which is mostly referred to as Merrillville by the locals. Downtown has some cool stuff to check out, but you're quite limited with a selection of amenities for as populated of an area that Hobart is in. It gets an 8 out of 20.
Cost of living.
This is easily the best thing about Hobart. Sometimes I talk about the cost of living and why some places are cheap, and it's because some of these places suck. Not here. Hobart is affordable and reasonably so. You don't get many of the downsides here that you'll find in other affordable areas. Much of this has to do with money. The median household income in Hobart is a respectable $71,000 per year, rather than what you would see in other affordable places that will see 1 out of every 5 residents living in poverty. Look at this, a $190,000 home in Hobart, just 1 block away from Lake George, 5 blocks away from downtown, only $190,000. I can tell you right now that a house like that, near a nice downtown like Hobart's in my neck of the woods, would be twice that amount at the very least. Once again, Hobart offers nice, chill living, safe community, affordable, decent enough schools, nice little downtown area to check out with a lake. Not a bad deal at all. Cost of living gets a 20 out of 20. All in all, the Chris Livability Score for Hobart, Indiana is 117 out of 180, putting it in second place out of all of the places that I've done this for in Indiana so far. Hobart is kind of big, kind of spread out, and there's a lot of places in town that I didn't get to show you in this video, but it's really just dotted suburban sprawl. But if you would like to see more of what Hobart looks like, make sure to check out my second video where I'll show you all of the footage that I filmed but didn't use in this video. The video will be uploaded on my second channel called Chris Harden's Video Archives, and the link for that will be down below once it's uploaded. Hobart might not be the most glamorous place, but there's certainly some upsides to it. I don't know if I would like living in certain parts of this town personally, but if I had to live in the region, checking out some homes to buy near the downtown area of Hobart would definitely be on the top of my list. And to see the differences between living somewhere like Hobart versus living somewhere like Crown Point, make sure to check out this video here. I'll see you in Crown Point. Peace.